Okay, thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Lon, and thank you to Ann and Nick for your wonderful hospitality here. It was really a pleasure. It was also painful for us to set up this show here. We had our last model arrive at 12 o'clock today, but we're happy to see everything has arrived and is accessible for everyone here. So I'm going to start off briefly. I think Lon did a wonderful introduction to us. This is our wonderful headshots here. And so you can put a name to a face here in the front row. And I'm going to start off this discussion really talking about core formula. For this year's It's Different proposal, we really began to position our firm in such a way where we're heavily invested in the performance of culture and the culture of performance, two very elusive, ethereal things that we think that architecture has the ability to capture, reveal, exploit the energies that are inherent within it. And I'm starting with Core Formula. Core Formula is a website that we started in 2008, and its initial intent was to begin to showcase student work for multiple schools, fellow friends and colleagues, for us to somehow start a conversation with a lot of younger faculty. And since it's gone through a series of iterations and reskinnings and regrowths, and finally it's developed a degree of coherency and direction that we feel really confident with, and that we're in discussions and bringing on additional partners to make it a much more stronger entity. So this is a diagram, really serves us in a way to have you understand what's feeding the actual site itself. And so there are 5 pillars, and they move from core curation, core awareness, core balance, soft core, and hard core. And each of those have corresponding factions within them. Where core curation, we're currently just finished our 4th exhibition here in the city, and both in a combination of our work and other artists within the city and the world at large. Core awareness is an interview series, both original content interviews with professors, as well as in the process of archiving a lot of material from the late 70s and 80s. Core balance is what we consider sustainability, and we have hardcore, which is hardware, and softcore, which is software. And so each one of these on the site is our own research sketchbook that we want to expose and somehow make connections. And it's not only a tool within the academic setting, but it's also a tool within the professional setting. A lot of people use it as a supplement to their continuing education here. And so with each one of the projects that we walk through here today, we somehow position them or view them through these specific lenses. And to even begin to step it up further, what it has allowed us to do is allowed us to produce a very robust network, meaning that it's not just a site where information is deposited, but it has allowed us to make connections with individuals, and these are just a handful of them. From the core balance, these are manufacturers that are at the cutting edge of solar cell technology, water recycling systems, and other material fabrications that lend themselves to energy, and the soft core with software partners. We've been in a very wonderful position to take advantage of that and get consultation, and really that's what happens at each of these venues here. And so the partnerships with Milgo Buffkin, with MGX, with Kuka Robotics, with MakerBot, none of this would have been possible without us being able to establish the structure of core formula. And it's really opened up a lot of doors for us and a lot of different opportunities, not only within the New York area, but even in the world at large. And so the first project that I'm going to open up here today, and I'm going to be taking the first half of the lecture, and Ajmal is going to be picking up the second. And I'm going to be talking about 2 of our built projects. They're not on display in the gallery next door. The first one is what we call Arch XXX. And it's a project that we were approached by an artist, Cheryl Waring. She's a performance artist that basically sits down at a table and asks people to come to her with questions for the president. She dresses in 1950s garb, she uses a vintage typewriter, and she hand types these letters, scans them, and puts them into a book, as well as sends them to the president. And so she had an interest in somehow containing this small little event space in such a way that not only helped complement and contain her work, but began to extend into a new future. And so from that discussion, we had decided that we were going to use an arch typology. And then through a series of small distortions, it would begin to find its way into the gallery and take advantage of the stage that she set. And so initially, starting off with the cube octahedron, we have quite a amount of love for this particular piece of geometry. It's extremely facile in space packing. And what you're looking at here is an exhaustive 2-week exploration of just some of the iterations to begin to see what's the potential of this as a system. And we finally arrived at what we felt to be the front runner. And the way that one begins to evaluate this, we needed a unit that would be able to be deployed within a field condition. We consider it almost a 2.5D surface. And in this particular diagram set, you have a male and a female piece. It became extremely important that this, as a new type of brick, one would be able to connect, build, and grow from it without using chemical fastening. So it's a simple tab system. And this would be a quick prototype of how that as a system begins to grow. And so this is the final form of the piece with the distortions you saw on the slide previously. And the black and white are the male and female pieces, and so there's approximately 3,500 pieces within the entire set. And what also begins to happen with this as a project, it became a case study to begin to look at material fabrication and how one can begin to embed a degree of intelligence within the system. And in this case, the intelligence came about for structural reasons and needing to begin to diminish one's cross-section as you move across. And so this is beginning to code that type of information. And so these are the close-up shot of the individual pieces, the edge detail, and how it was terminated. And this is a shot from the gallery space, or just outside of the gallery space. And so this was in downtown Chicago, in the Chicago Tribune building, a really wonderful gallery space that had street access. And this is the actual shot of it installed within the space. And so you see the table with the dual typewriters on it, and the arch spanning across the space, producing a bridge to begin to hold that as an event. And this is a shot looking from the outside. And what you're seeing on the wall is like an echo or a mimicking of the formwork, where each of the individuals that propose a question to the president has their photograph taken with a small blurb connected to it. The next project here is Clay Sutures. This is a 3-building apartment complex in suburban Louisville. And one of our desires with this project in particular, it's called the Clay Sutures. We wanted to try to find a way to begin to pinch the landscape, and pinch the landscape with brick. And so there's a seamlessness, or a desire for seamlessness across the landscape as it moves up a facade, down the roof, and back to the other side. And this is beginning to show how that in turn plays itself out. And this is how it's in turn laid out on the site. The budget for this project was insultingly low. It was $600,000 construction budget, which means that we had to be extremely smart in how one approaches the space planning. And so what you're looking at are some very conservative plan layouts that try to condense as much of the services as possible and fight our battle at the edge condition. What we're also interested in is a certain iconography. We joke that this is a supersized Monopoly house. We're really fascinated with that 5-figure line that produces the icon of domesticity from a very early age. And these, as jumbo-sized versions of them, even from the point of how and where the brick was selected. You can see in the lower section there, through the center, on how within that internal core, a lot of the surface is concentrated, and it really aerates the perimeter. And so the battle that we decided to fight within this one resides in the surface. And the surface in this case came in the form of the brick and the skinning of the two facades and roof. And what we've decided to do within the brick is begin to implement a pattern relief that would allow for shading throughout the course of the year. So this as a wall became a system that had the ability to, one, reflect and absorb energy. And in relationship to ivy, it became a system that within the summer months it provided a high degree of protection for the high sun within the sky, and in the winter months it would recede and allow for one to warm and heat the home. And so these are some of the construction shots from the site and some of the studies that we've done to beginning to test this. In this case, it's the winter solstice, but it's a relatively simple move that the contractors in Louisville could manage. This is another shot of the space in its intermediate stage of production. And so in this case here, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years before it actually comes into full detail and matures. And I think that at that particular intersection we'll begin to be able to assess how it performed and was all of this working. This is a shot in between the two buildings looking at the third across the way. And so you're completely engulfed within this brick facade system that is an end cap terminus. Now I'm going to hand off the mic to Ajmal Aqtash.
So that was 12 minutes. It looks like I have 8 minutes. I'm going to reset. Okay, before I start, I just want to briefly thank the Architecture League and Anne. This is a wonderful opportunity, and we thank you for giving us the platform to, one, talk about our work and to really extend this tradition of the Architecture League. Thank you. I also want to thank Lon Combs for that wonderful introduction. Long, but worth it. Thank you. So before I get into the Brooklyn Mosque, I want to briefly sort of talk about these 3 particular projects that we're going to go into. They all share a similarity in that each one of these buildings that I'm going to get into understands its position on the globe. And I think as buildings become more relevant in terms of site conditions, there's an incredible enrichment to the design proposals. So in this case, we have the Brooklyn Mosque, and the mosque within the 21st century is deeply sort of entrenched within the idea of transparency, and how transparent can an institutional building like a mosque become within New York City post 9/11. So in this case, we went through a pretty interesting dialogue with the client in terms of developing a strategy, one, to place it and be a fully functional prayer space, and 2, begin to set up a dialogue with the community. So people understand what's going on. People understand that there's a culture that resides within. And so what we came to an agreement was not only to propose a mosque, but in addition to the mosque was a community center. And through this community center, there would be a dialogue with the surrounding context. So you can see here within the site, there's, follow the mouse, the building is situated on a corner lot adjacent to a public park. And recognizing the ability or the opportunity to extend the program, both private and public, allowed us to formulate that transparency. For example, on certain days, the prayer sessions will be conducted, and depending on the occupancy, it might go above the capacity of what the building can hold. So in this case, we begin to understand how the east facade with the canopy door can become an extension or a way to bleed the private and public program back and forth. So the people attending the sessions will actually be able to sit one on the park or even close off the street and extend the prayer space. So the landscape becomes more integrated. Within the traditional mosque, there's a large prayer space at the ground floor, and the prayer space called for an uninterrupted floor area. And if I can just go back to the first slide, we began by making two architectural moves. The first one was to eliminate the columns at the base, and by doing so, we replaced it with an arch, a more traditional arch. The second move was to put a glass veil that was shrouded with a folded system. That system allowed us to then begin to incorporate the prayer space as well as the community center. As you can see here on the plan, there's a main prayer space. To the north, we incorporated a stairwell. That stairwell was critical because we wanted to produce a proposal that at any given point, the community center does not get affected by the prayer sessions. So by locating it externally on the north side, one can move in and out through all the floors as needed. So on the second floor, you have an additional prayer space, a kitchen, a dining space, and if we proceed further, the third floor, there's apartments for the imams and a library, and if we extend to the top floor is a children's space. So within this section, you can begin to see the juxtaposition of the prayer space surrounded by the public community program, uninterrupted by the stairwell. In addition to developing a skin system, we began to understand the performative. So you had the cultural aspects on one side, and we wanted to begin to understand the performative. As Richard pointed out, we are trying to develop a vocabulary both in culture and performance. In this particular condition here, the double-layered skin allows us to, one, create a low pressure and a high pressure. The high pressure is obviously as heat builds up and the temperature begins to develop at higher levels. The pressure differences causes the warm air to be sort of pulled out through the opening and out into the space. So by doing so, one, we're trying to maintain a relatively comfortable range within the temperature. And second, the skin is trying to produce a diffused, constant sort of daylighting condition. This is just a sketch of the explorer axonometric articulating the glass blocks, the trays, and then finally the folded system. An image of the children's space and a rendering of the prayer space. And this was important. One, we know that the prayer space was the main goal of this building, so we wanted to treat it with a certain level of intimacy and respect, but within that dialogue produce a level of transparency that ties it back culturally, connecting it back to the community. The second project is the UN building, and this project started with a research effort that started at Pratt. We were interested in post-war architecture and the state of post-war architecture and where it could begin to go. We were studying Corb and Mies as some of the figures, but we decided to pull one out in particular, which is the UN headquarters. We were interested in, one, redesigning the UN building, not completely, but just redesign it from its existing condition, but to push it through a new cultural model. For us, I think the first slide that Richard showed was the core.form-ula sort of diagram that states all the different divisions. One is hardware, software, fabrication, technology, etc. We're interested in pushing it through that filter. And so by doing so, we understood that in 1945, when the building was first completed, there were 51 members. World population was at 2.6 billion. 2010, that has increased to 192 members and currently at 60 billion. We're interested in the future. So we were running this scenario of what it would mean to propose a UN building in 2025, and what does it mean for the United Nations as an entity. how did it progress forward with this piece of architecture? So we, again, produced two basic moves. One was to produce a slope on oblique to the tower by putting two triangles, one at the north and south side. And on the west and east, we began to drape the skin. These moves were both an understanding that because of the population growing internally within there was a need for greater square footage. So these moves were both calculated for increasing the programmatic areas as well as performative. Just a simple brief description. UN building is oriented north-south with the glazing on the east and west. This, as an idea, is an incredible proposal, but from a performative aspect, it's actually quite troublesome. And the reason, the sunset rises in the east and sets in the west, so throughout the entire day, there's an accumulation of heat. And so the occupants are quite uncomfortable, and I think currently they're remasking the surface skin now. Just a typical section. We are trying to understand, one, not only increase the programmatic square footage, but as well as the public spaces. So we are producing a skin that begins to drape the entire campus. This is a slide indicating different sustainable strategies, and I think within this strategy, we're looking at the overall campus, which is straightforward: some photovoltaic, wind, light diffusers, etc., water collection. This is an image of looking at the cross-section of the building with air, CFE, wind, because the building is oriented north-south, but the west is actually oriented, the west facade is oriented towards the northwest, where the prevailing winds are coming from. So what we're doing now is running it through our software packages to try to understand the solar heat gain, to try to understand the different climates, to try to understand the different flows of energy through the site. So we began to understand two basic moves. A bigger move at the scale of the architecture and smaller moves at the scale of the facade. At the scale of the facade, we began to understand that there's a very simple move that we can begin to deploy here, which is understanding solar collection, shading, and redirecting light, all within one basic fin system. We started by looking at a traditional curtain wall system, which is strong in its vertical and horizontal axis. We supplemented that with a diagonal fin because we recognized the east and west as the main surfaces that need to be treated with this fin system. We zeroed in on an angle that allowed us to, one, collect and shade. From that, we were able to produce a single ribbon that collects, redirects light through a bounce, and shades all at the same time without any dynamic controls. So we were interested in a very static condition that provided all those surfaces. In the process, we realized that we're now beginning to develop a vocabulary for design, and that in the sense that we're inflating the skin. And I think even with the curtain wall, we understood that the curtain wall doesn't have to end where the glass stops. It can begin to grow further out, so that there's a relationship to the environment. So these are just some sections and drawings that begin to articulate that condition. Within this discourse, I think we were interested in fabrication, the idea of taking single sheets of metal and understanding how that gets folded. In addition to that, understanding the assemblages, processes that are involved. Just an image of the cross-section. And how does that begin to interact with the spaces inside? So again, we're talking about a surface idea, but within this process, it's connected back to the space. And I think that's the crucial idea that we want to get across, that the surface of the building is highly connected to the interior spaces. So if this is facade 1.0, the electric plant is facade 2.0, and I think we're slowly realizing what it means to begin to prototype your idea and your design. In this particular case, this is building out in LA, where it doesn't rain very much. Probably gets 10 to 20 inches on a good year, where other cities relatively get more, 3 times as much. And so the strategy here was to understand the big cross-sectional move as well as the small cross-sectional move within the facade. So the larger cross-sectional move is the first thing we did was, one, begin to produce voids within the building. These voids increase the exterior condition for the building. Within this project and within the last, I think there's a sense of urgency to minimize the distance between the occupant and the outside world. So by bringing nature closer to the occupant, you're now producing a more comfortable, constant temperature or environment. So in this particular case, there was a very large governmental building that was in existing condition, which had a relatively small window aperture, tinted glass, which equated to poor lighting and massive mechanical systems to cool the space. So we saw that as an opportunity to propose a solution. We approached it by looking at the sun, water, and plant life. Within all this, we're interested in one main running theme, which is harvesting. How can we begin to harvest energy? How can we begin to harvest water? How can we begin to increase the quality of natural daylight? And I think we went through many ideas, but we ended up with a big sort of cross-sectional design move, which is one, again, to produce the voids and to produce what we call what's existing technology called the living machine. Now, if I just monitor my time here, I got 2 minutes. So if I move fairly quickly here and just try to express what we're trying to get across here, yes, we looked at many technologies, but I think at the end of the day, there's one underlining theme here, and that's to inflate the skin. And so I'm not going to spend time here, but just go directly into the facade. In this particular case, we broke up the main glass panel into two. The upper portion being more of an engine that provides solar or captures solar energy and UV rays, while the lower half is about water harvesting. Now, if you look at through the cross section, we're interested in inflating the skin, but embedding it and injecting it with technology again. Within the system, as you can see here in the lower half, we recognize that there's a great deal of moisture in the air. And if we begin to understand technology, we can begin to harvest that water from the air. And it's a very simple process of inducing condensation on the surface. So through this very simple system, we are now able to incorporate water into the facade. That's a very big sort of wrong step in a direction typically from most people. But we were quite confident that we could begin to bring water into the facade and harvest it. The second move was to begin to deploy solar tubes and hybrid solar technology. The circular dishes along the top provide natural daylight. It takes UV rays from the environment, redirects it into fiber optic cable, and when through that fiber optic cable we can go into 50 feet into the space. You see this reflective ceiling here, and emit natural daylight. This cycle can occur literally past sunset. So you're not taking solar energy, but you're taking UV rays, which are quite abundant. In addition to that, the tectonic quality of the slumping glass enhances the idea of a solar tube by using the slump and its curvature to recalibrate the focal point of solar rays. So it's all about geometry, integrated geometry and performance when it comes to this facade. We recognize that LA is one example, but I think as we design and we move forward, we want to begin to understand what does it mean to reposition this? What does it mean to reposition in New York versus Los Angeles, and what gets recalibrated? How does that system begin to readjust itself? So this is just a typical rendering. And I think as we are producing these renderings and producing these prototypes, yes, we are starting at the skin. The skin is sort of the area where we can begin to produce that dialogue with the environment. I think those are the design opportunities that we want to take advantage of, but not necessarily stay. So we're very much interested in how the surface affects the volume. And I think throughout our practice, I think this is something we're going to be challenged with as we move forward. I think that's the last slide. Thank you very much.